the time I pull a pound of ground beef out to thaw in the morning for dinner, and sometimes when dinner rolls around, I am not sure what I'm going to be making with that pound of ground beef. So today I will be sharing 10 of my family's favorite go-to ground beef recipes. These dinners are so easy to throw together. They're total crowd pleasers. You're going to be wanting to make them time after time because they're so good. Let's go get to my kitchen and let's get to cooking. To kick us off today, we are making this one pan lasagna. This one is really good. So to the pan on my stove, I added a pound of ground beef, or you could use Italian sausage, ground turkey, chicken, or any meat substitute. Cook your ground beef through, then season it with 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of pepper, 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and 1 teaspoon of onion powder and garlic powder, or use any type of seasonings that you like. Give this a stir. Now you're going to add in 2 cups of beef broth, followed by 8 ounces of elbow pasta, and then add in 24 ounces of marinara sauce. I'm just using a jar just to make it easy. Give this a stir and let this simmer on your stove for about 10 minutes, stirring it occasionally. And if the liquid line gets too low while this is simmering, the pasta really won't cook properly, so you could add in 1/2 cup of water at a time until the pasta is cooked through if the liquid line gets too low like this. Now that my pasta is tender, I'm going to stir in 1/2 cup of mozzarella cheese. Of course, the cheese is optional, but I just love cheese. If you've been around here for a while, you probably know. But just let the cheese melt down, and then you could serve this delicious dinner up. We absolutely love this one pan lasagna so much. Also, it is so amazing that it just cooks in one pan on the stove. I love one pan or one pot meals so much for that reason, just because you have little to no dishes at the end of the dinner. I serve this with a side salad with spring mix, tomatoes, croutons, carrots, and ranch dressing for the dressing. Now we're making this taco Dorito casserole. So to the pan on my stove, I'm adding a pound of ground beef, or you could use ground chicken, any meat substitute, or ground turkey. I'm also adding in a yellow onion that I diced. Break this ground beef up and cook it through. Once it's cooked through, if you have a lot of excess grease in your pan, just remove the grease. Then add in about 2 tablespoons of taco seasoning. Next, add in 1/4 cup of water along with a can of Rotel. It's just diced tomatoes with green chilies. It adds a lot of flavor. Now I'm adding in 1 cup of sour cream. Then add in 16 ounces of refried beans. After you add the refried beans in, just give this a really good stir and stir everything to combine. Once it looks like this, pull out a baking dish and spray it with nonstick spray. To the bottom of the baking dish, add 1/2 cup of crushed Dorito chips. Spread those chips out so they're kind of like in an even layer. Now over the chips, add 1/3 cup of shredded Colby Jack cheese. Over the cheese, add the taco ground beef mixture. Spread it out carefully just so you don't mix the layers up. And then over that taco mixture, you're going to add 1/2 cup more crushed Dorito chips. Then add 1/3 cup of shredded Colby Jack cheese on the very top. Bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. Once out of the oven, just top it with your favorite taco toppings. I topped mine with some sliced avocado, salsa, and lime, but top yours with anything that you like. This is so flavorful and rich. This casserole is almost like a treat. It really is super duper delicious. Now we are making the easiest, most delicious spaghetti bolognese. To my Dutch oven on the stove, I added in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Once my oil was hot, I added in 1 diced up white onion and 2 large carrots that I diced. If you don't want to add in the carrots, you certainly don't have to, but I really do like the added flavor the carrots give. And then I added in 1 pound of ground beef. I'm breaking the ground beef up and I'm cooking it through at this point. Once my ground beef was cooked through, I removed any excess grease in the pan. Then I added in 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. I gave it a really good stir for about 20 seconds to let the garlic become fragrant. And then I added in our 1/3 cup of beef broth. I let this simmer on my stove for a couple of minutes to let the beef broth reduce down. Next, I added in 2 tablespoons of tomato paste along with a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes, and then for the seasonings to give this plenty of flavor, I added in 2 teaspoons of dried oregano, 2 teaspoons of dried basil, a teaspoon of salt, and my favorite part, a tablespoon of brown sugar. The brown sugar is kind of like a secret ingredient just because it adds so much extra flavor. You gotta trust me, it's really good. After you gave this a really good stir, put the lid on top and let this simmer on your stove for at least 10 minutes. While it's simmering, go ahead and start on your spaghetti noodles. To this pot of boiling water, I added in 10 ounces of those noodles and I cooked them according to the package instructions. Now that my sauce is through simmering, I gave this a really good stir and then it was time to serve it up. I do have a super quick dinner section in my cookbook. This section is for dinners with like minimal ingredients or that take little to no time at all to make. This recipe is on page 176 in that section. I could absolutely serve this spaghetti to my family every week this year and not get tired of it. It's that good. It is 10 out of 10. And then I served it with a breadstick and alongside of a side salad with lettuce, avocado, cherry tomatoes, and a little bit of Italian dressing. Now we are making this ground beef potato skillet. So on my cutting board right here, I'm peeling and dicing a sweet potato and a russet potato, or you could use 2 russet potatoes or 2 sweet potatoes, whatever you'd like. But over to the pan on my stove, I added a pound of ground beef along with a diced yellow onion. Just cook this ground beef through at this point. Now that it's cooked through, I added in a tablespoon of taco seasoning, a 1/2 cup of water, a tablespoon of minced garlic. Next, 6-ounce can of diced green chilies that adds a lot of flavor. Then a 14-ounce can of fire roasted diced tomatoes along with the potatoes that we cut up earlier. Give this a stir and let this simmer on your stove for about 20 minutes. You do want to stir this frequently while it's simmering just so the potatoes don't stick to the bottom of your pan. But now that my potatoes are fork tender, to check to see if they are fork tender, just poke a little fork in there and see if the potatoes are softer. I'm adding in a 1/2 cup of Mexican style cheese. Just let the cheese melt down and then you could serve it up. If you're not a cheese fan, you don't have to add the cheese, but here's what my plate looks like. I topped mine with a little bit of sour cream, avocado, diced tomatoes, and cilantro. This is a wonderful lower carb dinner. It is so flavorful. We absolutely loved it so much. It also is great if you want to meal prep it or freeze it for the week. These sheet pan cheeseburgers with potatoes on the side have quickly turned into one of my all-time favorite ways to make cheeseburgers. To this big bowl, I added 1 pound of lean ground beef, followed by 3 tablespoons of breadcrumbs, a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, 2 tablespoons of yellow mustard, and 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. I mixed this all together, and I do want to mention to you, make sure you do use lean ground beef for the meat in this recipe, just because you don't want your sheet pan to be too greasy while you're baking it. But to one side of the sheet pan, I added 1 pound of little golden potatoes that I diced, and to the other side of the sheet pan, I added 1 yellow onion that I sliced. I'll spray these veggies with a little bit of oil spray, and then I seasoned them with a dash of salt and pepper, and then I kind of mixed them up a little bit. This is the fun part. I have our hamburger meat right here. You are going to divide it into 4 different hamburgers. You don't want them too thin and you don't want them too thick, so kind of just in between. Then I baked this in a preheated oven to 425 degrees for about 25 to 28 minutes. And I do want to let you know, if you want to add sliced mushrooms onto the sheet pan, you can, or really any other veggies. You could always add veggies or subtract them. Like I said before, I absolutely love these sheet pan burgers so much. They are actually on page 88 in my cookbook. I love making these burgers all year round. They go great if you have like a burger craving in the fall and winter too. Here's my plate of food. For the last couple minutes of baking in the oven, I threw on the hamburgers some slices of cheddar cheese, but I also served my hamburgers in a brioche bun. This was my first time using brioche buns, and I thought they were pretty good. And then I served them with pickles, mustard, and ketchup, and then those potatoes are so tender and good. You definitely have to give these hamburgers a try. Now we are making this hearty stuffed pepper casserole. Over to my cutting board. I'm going to begin by dicing up a yellow onion, a red bell pepper, and a green bell pepper over to the pan on my stove. I'm adding a pound of ground beef. I'm also adding in the peppers and onion. Go ahead and break that ground beef up and cook it through. Once it's cooked through, just remove any excess grease from the pan. Over to my 9x13 baking dish, I'm spraying it with nonstick spray. Then add that ground beef mixture right in there. Next, I'm adding in a cup of uncooked white rice. Then you're going to add in a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, along with a 14-ounce can of petite diced tomatoes, or you could use regular diced tomatoes. Then add in a cup and a half of beef broth, along with 3/4 cup of water, then a teaspoon of salt, pepper, paprika, and Italian seasoning. The last thing you're going to add in is a half a cup of shredded Colby Jack cheese. This casserole is so easy to make. Give this a stir and then cover this tightly with foil. Bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 40 minutes. After 40 minutes, just remove it from the oven, take the foil off, give it a stir, and then sprinkle about a cup more shredded Colby Jack cheese on top. Bake this for an additional 15 minutes or until the rice is tender. Here's what my plate of food looks like. This casserole is so delicious. It really comes together in no time at all. Also, it freezes well. So if you want to make 2 of these and like freeze one, you could do that too. It will work out. But I had seconds of this just because it was so good. My family really enjoyed it. Now we are making these mini mozzarella stuffed meatloafs, so to get them started, I have about 1.5 pounds of red potatoes right here. I cut them into smaller bite-sized pieces. I brought the potatoes over to this large bowl and I added them right in there. Next, I'm adding in a 12-ounce bag of frozen green beans, or you could use fresh green beans. Frozen are just a little bit more affordable right now at the grocery store. I also added in 2 tablespoons of olive oil with a dash of pepper and salt. I gave this a really good stir, and I do want to mention if you want to use other veggies for this recipe, you certainly can. I set our veggies to the side. We're going to work on the meatloaf mixture now. So I added in this bowl a pound of ground beef along with 1 egg. Next, add in 2/3 cup of Italian style breadcrumbs. I like the Italian style breadcrumbs compared to like the regular breadcrumbs because they have more flavor. Then I added in 2 tablespoons of ketchup, a tablespoon of minced garlic, followed by a tablespoon of yellow mustard and a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. And then for the seasonings, just a teaspoon of onion powder and a dash of pepper. I gave this a really good mix. I mixed mine with my meat masher, or you can mix it with a spoon or your hand. I have my sheet pan here and I lined it with aluminum foil. Now I'm spraying it with plenty of nonstick spray. Then I grabbed our vegetables that we made up earlier and I just dumped them onto my sheet pan. And as you see, I'm spreading them out to the best of my ability right now. Next, I grabbed our meatloaf mixture that we made up earlier. And then I grabbed our cheese. So I have about 5 ounces of mozzarella cheese right here that I cubed into smaller pieces. This is what we'll be stuffing our mini meatloafs with, but I made a total of 5 mini meatloafs for this recipe. I just grabbed some of that ground beef mixture, kind of formed it into a meatloaf, and then I stuffed it with a couple pieces of the mozzarella cheese. You want to make sure the mozzarella cheese is covered with the meatloaf mixture just so it doesn't spill out onto the sheet pan while baking. But now that we have all the meatloafs on my sheet pan, I put about a tablespoon more ketchup on top of each of the mini meatloafs. This will give it some added flavor. Then I brushed it on. This baked in a preheated oven to 400 degrees for about 25 to 28 minutes, or until the ground beef was cooked through. Also, these mozzarella stuffed meatloafs are in the sheet pan section of my cookbook, and you will find them on page 92. So if you have a cookbook, go ahead and pull it out for this recipe. Seriously, you guys, even if you're not the biggest meatloaf fan in the world, I still think you will love this one. The mozzarella on the inside just sends this meatloaf out of this world. And then those vegetables on the side are perfectly tender. This meal is 10 out of 10. If you've never made sheet pan quesadillas, you absolutely need to. So to get them started off, to the pan on my stove, I added 1 pound of ground beef. I broke it up a little bit and then I added in 1 onion that I diced along with about a tablespoon of taco seasoning. Break that ground beef up and cook it through. Once it is cooked through, if there's any excess grease in the pan, just remove it. Then I added in about 2 more tablespoons of taco seasoning along with 1/3 cup of water. I gave this a really good stir. Now I'm going to add in 1/3 cup of salsa. Use any type or any brand of salsa that you like. Next, add in a 15-ounce can of drained corn, followed by 15 ounces of drained and rinsed black beans. Give this a stir and then remove it from the heat. Pull out your cookbook because this one is on page 84. You could create these quesadillas in so many different ways. You could add chicken, you could make them meatless, you could add like tofu. They are really so amazing. You do want the bottom of your quesadillas to be nice and crispy, so make sure you spray your sheet pan with a little bit of oil spray. Now I'm adding about 6 burrito-sized tortillas overlapping each other slightly onto the sheet pan, and as you see, some of the tortillas are kind of hanging over the edge, and that's perfectly fine. I added that ground beef mixture right onto my sheet pan and I spread it out. Over the top, you are going to need cheese. I added about 1.5 cups of Mexican style cheese because I love cheese. And I do want to let you know, these quesadillas are amazing. You could always add ingredients to them or subtract ingredients. To the center of my sheet pan, I added 1 more burrito-sized tortilla, and then I kind of overlapped the tortillas on top of each other just like this. I sprayed the top of them with a little bit more oil spray. Then I placed another sheet pan over the top of this big, huge quesadilla. This is going to help melt the cheese and get the top of the quesadilla nice and crispy and flat. After this baked in my preheated oven to 425 degrees for about 20 minutes, I removed it. I removed the top sheet pan and then I served this up. I love topping my quesadillas with a little bit of sour cream, salsa, tomatoes, and cilantro. I've made these sheet pan quesadillas on my channel before. My family just loves them so much, and I will be making them over and over again. And like I said before, you can make them your own so easily by adding ingredients or subtracting ingredients. My husband loves this one. We are making this 1 pot cheesy beef and potatoes now. I'm starting out by peeling and dicing my 4 russet potatoes, a yellow onion, and a yellow bell pepper. Over to the pan on my stove, I have about a tablespoon of olive oil in there. My oil is hot at this point. I added the potatoes and onion in there. I'm just going to cook the potatoes and onion for about 4 minutes on the stove. After that cooking time is up, I just added the bell pepper in along with a tablespoon of minced garlic, my 1 pound of ground beef, or you could use ground turkey, ground chicken, or any meat substitute that you like. And then for the seasonings, I tossed in a teaspoon of pepper, salt, Italian seasoning, and 2 teaspoons of paprika. I'm going to break the ground beef up right now, and I'm going to let it cook for about 5 minutes on my stove, so the ground beef won't be completely cooked through at this point. I added in 3/4 cup of chicken broth, and I'm going to let this cook covered for about 5 to 10 minutes or until the ground beef is cooked through and the potatoes are tender. At that point, I added in 1 cup of Colby Jack cheese. I gave it a stir and then I served this dinner up. Here's my plate of food. This dinner is so hearty and delicious. It has very minimal ingredients, and if you want to add ingredients to this, you certainly can, and you could also subtract ingredients to really make it your own and customize it for you and your family. Now we're going to make this beefy vegetable skillet. We're going to start out by cutting up our vegetables: a head of broccoli, 2 large carrots, a zucchini, and an onion. Set those veggies to the side. Into a large pot or Dutch oven, add a pound of ground beef, break that ground beef up and cook it until it's about 90% of the way cooked through, so not completely cooked through. We'll finish cooking it here in a moment, but just remove any excess grease from your pot. Then you're going to add in a tablespoon of minced garlic, followed by a dash of salt, pepper, and Italian seasoning. Give this a little stir. After that garlic is fragrant, just about 15 seconds later, add in those veggies that we cut up earlier and give this a stir. Add in about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste and about 1/3 cup of beef broth. I didn't film me adding that beef broth in, I'm sorry. But just stir this and let this simmer covered for about 5 to 10 minutes. You do want to stir it often while it's simmering, but now that our veggies are tender and our ground beef is cooked through, I added in 1/2 cup of shredded cheddar cheese. That's optional, you don't have to add the cheese in, but once the cheese melts down, you could serve this up. We served ours over cooked white rice, but serve this over anything that you could imagine. This is really super duper good, and I love how it's packed full of so many different vegetables. We love it, and if you didn't want to use ground beef, you could always use ground turkey or ground chicken as a substitute. I have so many more videos like this on my channel, so make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.